Hello gamers, Mike Mullis here for the original Next Level Gaming. Welcome to another video. We've got some more Atari VCS to talk about. You've already seen the unboxing video that I did about a month or so ago, and I've had a chance to do a couple of extra things with it. Of course, I'm going to be making some video content about the VCS games, the controllers, and my overall experience with the VCS. But not why I bought the VCS originally. I needed a good emulation box. I've got a ton of games over on my shelf that I don't have a system to play them on. Sega CD, 32X, Genesis, and I'm trying to collect for some systems that I haven't collected for in a while. PlayStation, PlayStation 2, 3DO. Trying to even maybe see if I can get into some systems I've never collected. NES, Super Nintendo, TurboGrafx, and I had been using an Xbox One with Retroarch, a customized build of Retroarch that is specific for the Xbox One, which has been working great. But there are some games that don't run on it very well, some systems that don't really work as well as a more modern PC. So the Atari VCS gives me an opportunity to try Retroarch on a Ryzen processor with a gig of RAM and not a fantastic video card. The AMD Radeon Vega 3 is not a high-powered card by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, it's an APU. It's bundled in with the CPU, but better than what the Xbox One video card has on it. So I'm looking forward to checking out and seeing what the system looks like with emulated games. I followed the instructions for installing a Windows 10 image onto just a regular USB 3 hard drive, plugged it into the VCS, fired it up, and got to work. So we're going to take a look at what that looks like, how I set it up, and let's get some game footage in. So enough of me talking, let's get to playing. So if you don't want to go through the process of putting an internal solid-state drive in your VCS, you could take an external drive like this Toshiba SATA 3, take the USB cable, plug it right into one of the USB ports on the back of the Atari VCS, and whatever image that you have on the hard drive will boot. So for me, I have a Windows 10 image that we're going to go ahead and boot up now. Okay, so we're going to go through a quick process here. The VCS is going to boot up. It's going to take me to my Windows 10 login screen, and I'm going to go ahead and log in. From here, I'm going to split the screen in half. On the left-hand side, you see my feed from OBS, and from the right-hand side, I placed my camera in front of my television so that you can see what I see when I'm playing. We're going to fire up Retroarch, and I've taken the modern controller, and that is what I'm going to be using today. I have it plugged into the USB port on the front of the Atari VCS. This is a Bluetooth controller, and it will work with Retroarch in Bluetooth, but the back triggers will not, and that's a Windows issue. So by plugging into the USB port, I have functionality over all the buttons and all the triggers on the controller. And with no latency, I might add. So let's fire up a game. We're going to go right to my favorite system, the Sega CD, and one of my favorite games on that system, well, you know, other than Sonic CD. Now I'm talking about Batman Returns. Has some great driving scenes in it and really showed off the sprite scaling and rotation of the Sega CD hardware at the time. I'm using the Genesis Plus GX core, and I've downloaded all the cores I need for today's demonstration. As you can see, it boots up just like the Sega CD with the BIOS and everything. And now we're going to get into the game. I also want to point out once again that there's no latency in the controller because I have it plugged into USB, and it's going to act exactly like my Genesis controller. In this mode, I'm using 3-button mode. One thing I want to point out is that when you are setting up Retroarch, there are various drivers you can use for audio, video, input, and more. For the video driver, I'm going to suggest using the one called GL Core. You have the option to run DirectX, so you can do DirectX run GL, and a couple of other things, including just a software driver. I suggest using GL or GL Core. It works great for not only the 16-bit and below games, but it's also going to work really well for some of the more advanced games that I'm going to show you in a little bit. But as you can see here, Batman Returns looks fantastic. I do want to point out as well, for some reason, my phone camera is washing out the image on the right-hand side. What you see on the left through OBS is very much what I see on the screen. I wanted to do this to show you that, indeed, I was playing this on the VCS. And for now, just sit back and enjoy Batman Returns for the Sega CD, and then we'll fire up something else. We're going to move into a computer emulation now, and Brother Peter loves the Commodore 64. While I'm an Atari guy, he was a Commodore guy. So Peter, this is for you. We're going to start with a game that both him and I enjoy on our respective computers, Blue Max. A very simple isometric game about a biplane that you control, flying pretty much straight up, shooting down other planes, bombing buildings and artillery, while all trying to stay alive, being shot at by planes, being shot at by guns on the ground. It was actually a pretty good game, and actually a pretty exciting game back in the day. Not sure it holds up exactly today, and of course, some younger gamers probably going to get bored with this real quick. But even on the Atari, I still play this a lot. So, Peter, this is for you. Blue Max. Another great developer from the 80s, Epix, made a series of games based on the Olympics. Summer Games, Winter Games, World Games, would also go on to make California Games, which some of you might have seen on the NES and Genesis. This is Summer Games 2, one of the most popular, in my opinion, of that series. And again, it looks and sounds like the Commodore 64. Of course, as you can see too, none of that widescreen that you see today. This is a square 4x3 box, just like the monitors you used to have before. One thing I want to point out while we're watching this footage too, is you saw a little box come up that says Game Focus On. Computers, when you needed to use the keyboards, there are hotkeys that also run some RetroArch functionality. If you turn Game Focus On, it will turn off those hotkeys and you can use the keyboard like you would with the actual computer you're emulating. In this case, the Commodore 64. So, let's watch some javelin throwing. Let's see how bad I really am at this. Who had a ColecoVision? Oh, I did. I was amazed when my dad brought this system home with Zaxxon and all these other great arcade games. This was the closest thing that you could get at the time to an arcade experience. Coming from the Atari 2600, the Intellivision, and even the computers that we just looked at, the 5200, the Atari 800 and 1200, the Commodore 64, the ColecoVision really brought home the arcade experience. Now, you know, these are arcade games from the 80s, so of course they look like this. But the ColecoVision was such a great system, and I enjoyed it so much. And as you can see, Retroarch handles this just fine on the VCS. I had to include one of the staple games of the platform. When the ColecoVision launched, it came with Donkey Kong, which of course is one of Nintendo's most beloved properties. At the time, Nintendo was licensing their games to other places, so the ColecoVision was home to a lot of Nintendo games, including Donkey Kong, and here, Donkey Kong Jr. Donkey Kong Jr. is, of course, the story of Donkey Kong's son, trying to rescue Donkey Kong from Mario, or as he was still considered here, Jumpman. But again, this looked exactly like the arcade, and it made the ColecoVision such an awesome system to have at the time. And as you can see once again, this is running right on the Retroarch ColecoVision core on the VCS perfectly. This is a game I went back to a lot, and now that it's easy to run on the VCS, I'm going to be going back to this even a lot more. It's a great pick up and play arcade game, like many of the arcade games were at the time. Alright, so we've emulated some easy stuff. Let's try something that might hit the hardware a little bit. Let's do some 3DO. Now, the 3DO is a 32-bit system that I did not have. I was a Sega guy, and so I was running Saturn stuff, and the 3DO just was not in my price range at all. So this is the first time I've had a chance to really sit down with one, and emulating the games gives me a little perspective on what I missed. We're going to start with one of EA's games, and this was a series that has been very popular for EA, Need for Speed. This version was just simply called Rodentrak Presents Need for Speed. So you're going to see the 3DO running polygons just like the PlayStation and just like the Saturn. And Retroarch does a very good job of emulating this much graphic fidelity. You know, it's funny to use the words graphic fidelity, knowing what we have at home today with the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 and the Nintendo Switch and these modern consoles. But back then, this was hot stuff. And the VCS runs it just fine. I want to remind you something I said earlier in the video. Run this on GL Core. Do not try to run this on the DirectX or Vulkan video drivers. it will not work well. You will get a lot of choppiness and the frame rate will be in the gutter. Whereas running this on the GL Core, it runs great. I also would suggest turning on VSync and turning on adaptive VSync to help out with your TV if your TV supports it. You do hear a little audio stutter. That's happening as the audio and video are trying to sync up. It's not perfect, but you can see it's really good. I'm going to drop into the menu really quick because on this particular core, which is the 3DO Opera core, you can do some options to make the games a little better even at that. So I can overclock the virtual 3DO. Look what happens to the frame rate. It gets even smoother. This doesn't work for all games, but it does specifically work for Need for Speed. Now, of course, it's not overclocking your VCS. It's virtually overclocking the 3DO virtual hardware. So here you have it. Rodentrak presents The Need for Speed. Great game on the 3DO, and a great game to emulate here on the VCS. For our last game, I had to pick one more 3DO game that is well-known and well-known across multiple platforms. I'm talking about Gex. Now, I had Gex for the Sega Saturn, so I know what this game already looks like, how it played. I wanted to see what the 3DO looked like and how Retroarch would handle a 2D platformer. And I am not disappointed at all. Unfortunately, I don't know whatever happened to my copy of Gex. I don't know if I lost it when I was moving. Maybe I stupidly traded it in, but I don't have it anymore. So going back and playing it now is also really nice nostalgia for me. I am a sucker for 2D platformers. I always have been. So games like Clockwork Knight, things like that, I love. So Gex, I know it wasn't the most critically acclaimed game in the series, but I always enjoyed it. Well, I hope you liked this first look at some of the games that I've been able to emulate on the Atari VCS. From Sega CD, ColecoVision, Commodore 64, that's for you, Brother Peter, and 3DO, just a taste of what I've been playing over the last few weeks. And I'll be honest with you, why this video has been taking so long to come out, I've really been enjoying myself, and I want to show you some more. So this is the first of probably a 2, possibly 3-part video series on emulating through the Atari VCS. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. As always, if you like this, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. It really does help us. And don't forget, we have our NLG show on Tuesday nights at 9:30 p.m. with myself, Peter Hutink, and Chris Williams. We love talking the world of video games, whether it's the Atari VCS, Xbox, PlayStation, Switch, PC, Amico, handhelds, consoles, Game Pass, you name it, we cover it. And we have a great time doing so. And thank you guys so much for just hanging out with me today. We'll see you again really soon. And play on, gamers.